I always felt like there's a chance of us going back into the age of apocalypse reality. But for me personally, I thought it will be later stories down the road, like many stories down the road, before we're able to officially dive back into this reality. But then I forgot there's Nate Gray. And with Nate Gray being there, there's a possibility of us going back into that reality a bunch of times. Like, for example, X-Men Annual 96. With this annual right here, it's Nate Gray going back to his home reality for the first time. Because at the end of our last video, when it came to X-Men, he was having a conversation with Rogue and also Bishop. The problem was that when he tried to go back to his apartment, there were these ripples in time that appeared out of nowhere. So for a brief moment, for Nate Gray, he went back home to the age of apocalypse reality, then back to the main Marvel Universe reality. And so for Nate, he's kind of like, what in the world was that? I gotta figure that stuff out. And so as we get into the opening pages of this storyline, because it's Nate Gray right now trying to figure out like what is the actual cause for these ripples in times that's happening all over the world. And matter of fact, when it comes to Nate Gray, when it does seem like he's getting closer and closer to the actual location or the actual reason behind it, he'll see different parts of the age of apocalypse reality appear in front of him and be very confused about the idea of why in the world he's now being able to see his old reality. Now, let's not forget that when it came to the age of apocalypse reality, we were kind of left to believe that reality died. When you had Bishop go back in time to make sure that Charles Xavier did not die, then basically that reality no longer existed. Now, you did have 4 characters being able to come back over to the main Marvel Universe: Dark Beast, Sugarman, Holocaust, and also Nate Gray. And the last 2 are really important: Sugarman and also Nate Gray. And here's the reason why. Because Sugarman is responsible for what's happening right now when it comes to these ripples in time. Now, the Sugarman, as we all know, is from the age of apocalypse reality. So what he wants to do right now is go back home, but to an earlier point in time. And the reason why? To get one of apocalypse diseases, to kind of work on it, make it better, then bring it back to the main Marvel Universe and release it into this world right here. Now, when it comes to Sugarman, we also have to remember that he is responsible for Genosha. You see, we had learned early on that when it came to Genosha, it was this beautiful country. They had no issues at all. But in reality, they had a lot of issues. What they were doing is using mutants as slaves to kind of help build up their country. Now, of course, by this point in time, you're having the mutants fight against the humans in that country, basically a civil war. But it was the Sugarman who gave the scientists the ability to turn mutants into slaves. Now, the Sugarman right now is using a few mutates to kind of help power up his gateway that will lead him back into the age of apocalypse reality. Now, some of his security guards warn him that somebody is coming, and that somebody is, well, Nate Gray. Now, when it comes to Nate Gray, this man is pumping out a lot of psi energy. And for the Sugarman, that is perfect. And the reason why, because while you have Nate Gray fighting against the security guards who are working for Sugarman, but also trying to free the prisoners of the Sugarman is using the energy that Nate Gray is pumping out to help power up his gateway. So by the time you have Nate Gray realize what's going on, it's too late. The Sugarman had already used a gateway to go back to the age of apocalypse reality. And so for Nate, he knows he must follow Sugarman to basically stop him. So you also have Nate Gray go through the gate and of course head back home to the age of apocalypse reality. Now, once you have Nate Gray arrive in the old reality of his, he's then confronted by Magneto. Now, again, this storyline does take place in the past. So with that idea, Magneto has not formed the X-Men yet. But once you do have Magneto use his powers to pull Nate Gray out of the water, you have Nate realize, okay, cool, I'm now back home. I'm now back in the age of apocalypse reality. this is great, but at the same time, I gotta find Sugarman. Now, for Nate Gray, he's kind of confused on how in the world Magneto is able to move his body. But once you have Nate Gray kind of show off his ability, you kind of got two high-head characters kind of getting mad at one another. But you didn't have Forge appear. And we kind of have to remember that this is in the past again, because in the present day of this reality, Forge died. And so with the idea of Forge being alive again, this is great for Nate Gray, because for Nate Gray, he looked at Forge as his father figure. Now, once you do have the two guys hug it out, and once you have Nate kind of realize that he's in the past at the moment, you also have Nate trying his best to explain everything of what's happening right now with him coming back to this reality to find Sugarman. The thing is, Forge already knows what Nate Gray needs to do in this mission of his, because apparently a future version of Nate Gray has traveled back in time to an earlier point and told Forge everything. But as we do switch over to the Sugarman, we're now seeing the Sugarman at the moment at his lab right now, working on his brand new experiment, trying to turn Apocalypse virus into a better version of itself. But while you have basically Sugarman doing that, you also learn that one of his prisoners is Jason Wingard. And so you're going to have Sugarman try to use his brand new virus on Jason to see if it could possibly work, or what is the actual outcome of his virus once someone gets it. Now we do kind of switch back over to Nate Gray and Forge, right? Now for Forge, it's him telling Nate Gray why he never told Nate about the idea of meeting an older version of Nate Gray, because this older version of Nate told Forge like, hey, listen, you may never tell my younger self anything about us meeting at all technically until like this exact moment. And so that is why Forge never told Nate Gray anything at all while growing up with Forge. But here's the thing, because for Forge, it's also him telling Nate like, hey, listen, I know that in the other reality, you met a man known as Charles Xavier. That man right there is the reason why that world did not become like ours. Because for Nate Gray, he kind of hates Charles Xavier, because for Charles and really Magneto as well, it led into Onslaught and the idea that the Fantastic Four and the Avengers are supposedly dead. Now, in reality, they're not. They're currently in the Heroes Reborn reality. But for Nate Gray, it's kind of like, no, the age of heroes died in that reality because of Charles. But it's for saying like, no, you don't understand. Charles Xavier is the reason why that world did not get so dark like ours. Now, your future self also told me when we're supposed to attack. Technically, we have a guy in the inside of Sugarman's lab. But for Nate Gray, it's him kind of wondering like, what should be his next move here? Because for Nate Gray, he made a life for himself in the other reality, better known as the main Marvel universe, where he had fallen in love twice. There is Trinity. There's also Madeline Pryor. But in this reality, his home reality, there's Teresa, siren of this reality, who he had fallen in love with prior to going into the main Marvel universe. And so for Nate, he's kind of wondering if he should stay here, because with him now being in the past, only at the dawn of Apocalypse, with the power he has, he can stop Apocalypse and save this world from getting so dark and, well, horrible. But as we do switch back over to Sugarman, we see Sugarman about to give Jason this modified version of Apocalypse virus to Jason. And so you now have the inside man make his move, because he believes that Jason is going to die. And that would be Morph. So we get the idea that Morph was always working alongside with Forge and Magneto far in the past in the age of Apocalypse reality. But either way, you have Morph trying his best to protect Jason. The problem is that when it comes to Jason, he has the ability to play with your mind, to make you see things, taste things, hear things, feel things, anything he wants you to do, basically, when it comes to your five senses. And so for Morph, at first, he believed the Sugarman had gave Jason the virus. But in reality, Jason, better known as Mastermind, did not get the virus yet. But then at the very last second, help arrives. That would be Nate Gray, Magneto, and also Forge. Now, when the heroes arrive, of course, their main goal is to help out Morph, but to also help out Jason Wingard as well. But you also have our heroes trying their best to stop Sugarman's plan. Now, when it comes to Forge, he begins to get a tad bit worried about the actual future. And the reason why, because, okay, when it comes to Forge, he's kind of wondering if Nate Gray has the ability to stop Sugarman. Because for Sugarman, what he did was, like I said earlier, create a brand new virus. Not a brand new virus, but a better version of Apocalypse virus. But here's the thing. It's waterborne. So right now it's in the water. And so you have Forge tell Nate Gray what he has to do. It's Forge telling Nate Gray that he has to pull the virus out of the water and then kind of collect the different virus particles, put it into a ball. Then Magneto will have the ability to surround the particles into a metal ball and take it away somewhere cold to allow the virus to die. But this right here is going to push Nate Gray powers to his limit. And the reason why, because it's Nate Gray having to locate every single part of the actual virus that's in the water right now and then pull out the virus out of the water. And so for Nate, it's pushing his powers to his limit, but it really shows how powerful he truly is. Now you do have Nate being able to do it. You then have Magneto trap the virus and takes it away. Now, while you had Nate Gray doing that, you also have Magneto set up a portal that leads back into the main Marvel universe. And this kind of leads into a very quick ending, because once you have Nate Gray trying to rest, it's Forge saying like, you gotta go back home. You gotta go back to the main Marvel universe. But Nate wants to stay because Nate wants to make this world a better place. But the thing is, Forge knows they can't mess with time like that. Like, time has to continue the way it was already set to continue. And so, unfortunately, Nate has to go back. But Forge realized this would be a hard discussion with Nate. And so what Forge did was he told Jason, make it seem like Magneto was going to attack Forge. But in reality, it was just an illusion to have Nate Gray use his powers. And with his powers being activated, it also powers up the gate back home. And so you have the Sugarman and Nate Gray go back to the main Marvel universe. And just like that, we're now back into the old reality. But with that being said, guys, please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.